Not every Marvel creation deserves the spotlight. Some were so bizarre, embarrassing, or tone-deaf that Marvel quietly buried them. A hero whose story aged horribly, a mutant whose powers made readers cringe, and a sidekick so offensive he vanished after one issue. These aren't the icons Marvel celebrates, they're the ones it hopes you've forgotten. So, which characters crossed the line so badly Marvel had to hide them from history? Here are 10 Marvel characters they wish you never found out about. At number 10 is Nightcat, a Marvel character who wasn't created by a writer, but by a marketing plan. In 1991, Marvel found a real singer named Jacqueline Tavares, gave her a superhero costume, released a music album under her name, and launched a comic where she played a crime-fighting pop star. In the story, she was a nightclub performer who gained enhanced strength, speed, and night vision after being injected with a drug. She sang under spotlights by day and hunted dealers by night. Marvel expected a new multi-platform icon who would sell music and comics at the same time. But the project failed instantly, and the reaction was brutal. Fans ignored it, critics mocked it, and the album and comic both disappeared within weeks. Nightcat only made one brief cameo later on. No relaunch, no mention in any Marvel event. She wasn't defeated by a villain. She was abandoned by the audience, and Marvel buried her as if she never existed. At number 9 is NFL Super Pro, a Marvel character created in 1991 through a partnership with the National Football League. His real name was Phil Grayfield, a former football player turned sports reporter who survived an accident involving experimental chemicals and NFL gear. The accident granted him enhanced strength, speed, and endurance, and he fought crime wearing a nearly indestructible football uniform. Marvel promoted him with real NFL logos, guest appearances from players, and even a Spider-Man crossover in the first issue. But the reaction was harsh. Readers mocked the idea of a superhero dressed like a full-time linebacker. Sales dropped quickly, and the series ended after only 12 issues. One issue even had to be recalled for its offensive portrayal of Native American characters, bringing criticism from the Hopi tribe. When the license deal ended, Marvel stopped using the character entirely. He never appeared majorly again, was never reprinted, and was left out of handbooks and events. Super Pro wasn't defeated in battle. He was abandoned by the fans. At number 8 is the original father of Shang-Chi, Fu Manchu, a character Marvel now tries to hide. When Shang-Chi debuted in 1973, Marvel didn't create a new villain for him. They used Fu Manchu, a pulp-era mastermind built on racist yellow peril stereotypes from old novels and films. For years, Marvel printed stories showing Shang-Chi as the son of this villain, raised to serve him before turning against his empire. But the decision became a problem on 2 levels. First, Marvel never owned Fu Manchu. He was only licensed, which meant the moment the rights expired, Marvel could not legally reprint the early Shang-Chi comics. Second, the character represented a racist legacy that Marvel could not defend in modern times. So Marvel rewrote history. His name was changed, his past was replaced, and the original father was deleted from canon. Shang-Chi stayed. His first enemy was quietly erased. Today, most new readers never even hear the name Fu Manchu, exactly the way Marvel wants it. At number 7 is Shamrock, a character Marvel quietly hid after realizing what they had created. She debuted in 1982 as Ireland's national hero in Contest of Champions. Her entire identity was built on clichés: red hair, a green suit, and a power described as the luck of the Irish. Her ability came from spirits that interfered with events, so her enemies tripped, guns jammed, or attacks missed. Instead of praise, the reaction was blunt. Readers saw her as a walking stereotype, not a real character, and she was mocked for being nothing more than a cultural mascot. Writers quickly lost interest, and Marvel backed away. After only a few small appearances, Shamrock was written out of superhero life and turned into a powerless hairdresser in Ireland. No team ever recruited her, no series revived her, and Marvel never tried to rebuild her image. She wasn't killed. She wasn't reinvented. She simply faded out, making only rare minor cameos instead of a full return. At number 6 is William Burnside, the 1950s Captain America. Marvel revived Captain America to fight communists, but it wasn't Steve Rogers behind the shield. It was William Burnside, a fan who copied Steve's name, face, and origin, then took an unstable version of the super soldier serum. His stories showed Captain America as a paranoid, aggressive commie smasher, attacking enemies with hatred instead of ideals. Readers rejected him even then. Sales collapsed, the comic was canceled within a year, and the character disappeared. When Marvel brought back the real Steve Rogers in the 1960s, fans questioned who the earlier Captain America had been, forcing Marvel to retcon the entire era. Burnside was rewritten as an unbalanced impersonator and later turned into a fascist villain called the Grand Director, closing the door on that version forever. Marvel never reprints those 1950s issues without explanation. They are a reminder of a patriotic symbol rewritten into propaganda, and a Captain America the company does not want remembered. At number 5 is Dr. Droom, the hero Marvel quietly rewrote out of existence. He debuted in 1961 before Spider-Man or the Fantastic Four as one of Marvel's first superpowered characters. His story followed Dr. Anthony Ludgate, a Western psychiatrist who traveled to Tibet, met a dying lama, and was given mystical powers. But the twist that readers saw in print was shocking. The lama magically altered his face, transforming him into an Asian man so he could fit his new role. The reaction over time was embarrassment, not praise. It wasn't just forgotten. It was viewed as a misguided attempt to mix mysticism with a racial makeover. Soon after, Marvel stopped using him, changed his name to Dr. Druid, erased the transformation from canon, and pretended the original stories never happened. He later resurfaced as a minor sorcerer, then was killed off and rarely mentioned again. Dr. Droom wasn't abandoned because he failed in battle. He was abandoned because Marvel needed to hide how he was created. At number 4 is the Yellow Claw, a villain Marvel rarely acknowledges today. He debuted in 1956, created as a Cold War-era mastermind meant to imitate the pulp villain Fu Manchu. In his stories, he plotted world domination, commanded secret armies, and battled FBI agent Jimmy Woo. But the character was built on a stereotype from the start. His name used a racial label, his appearance followed the evil Oriental mastermind template, and his stories played into fears of Asian power during the 1950s. Readers did not embrace him, and his solo series was canceled after 4 issues, and the character quietly disappeared. As decades passed, the reaction became clearer. He wasn't just unpopular, he was outdated and offensive. Marvel later tried to soften the damage by retconning him as an imposter, an alien using the Yellow Claw identity, distancing the company from its original intent. Today, Marvel gives the spotlight to Jimmy Woo, not the villain he fought. The Yellow Claw remains a reminder of a character Marvel would rather stay buried in its past. At number 3 is U.S. Archer, the hero Marvel almost never mentions anymore. He debuted in 1983 in a short-lived comic called US-1. His real name was Ulysses Solomon Archer, a truck driver who survived a highway crash, received a metal plate in his skull, and gained the ability to pick up CB radio signals with his mind. Marvel built the entire series around trucking culture, highway villains, and a souped-up 18-wheeler that could fire weapons and outrun cars. The plan was to tie the comic to a toy truck line and capture a market outside regular superhero readers. The reaction was confusion more than excitement. Fans didn't take the concept seriously, sales sank, and the title was canceled after 12 issues. Marvel later treated the character like a joke, bringing him back occasionally in a comedy story years later. He was never added to a team, never relaunched, and never referenced in major events. U.S. Archer didn't fail in a fight. He disappeared because Marvel realized the world had already moved on from him. At number 2 is Japbuster Johnson, a character Marvel would never create today and rarely acknowledges. He appeared in 1942 in USA. Comics portrayed as a Navy pilot fighting Japanese forces during World War II. His very name used a racial slur, and his comic stories were built entirely on wartime propaganda. He didn't have superpowers, a costume, or a secret identity. His role was to exist as a one-man symbol of vengeance, speaking in violent slogans and treating an entire race as the enemy. At the time, the comic was accepted as patriotic material, but history did not treat it kindly. As decades passed, the name and concept were viewed not as heroism, but as a reminder of how casually racism was portrayed in early comics. Marvel never revived him, never reprinted his stories in regular collections, and only brought him occasionally into modern continuity. Marvel removed him from circulation once it became clear that the character was built entirely on a slur, not a story. At number 1 is Whitewash Jones, a character Marvel has spent decades trying to leave behind. He first appeared in 1941 as part of the Young Allies, a team of teenage sidekicks who fought alongside Captain America during World War II. He was meant to represent inclusion, but what readers saw was a racist caricature. Whitewash was drawn with exaggerated features, spoke in broken slang, carried a watermelon, and was used only for jokes while the white characters took the spotlight. At the time, the comic was sold as patriotic fun. Years later, the reaction was very different. Historians and fans called him one of the most offensive characters in Golden Age comics. Marvel stopped reprinting his stories, removed him from handbooks, and later explained that the old Young Allies comics were exaggerated wartime fiction, not a true record of who he was. In 2009, he was briefly brought back with dignity under his real name, Washington Jones, and then quietly retired again. Thanks for watching the video. Comment below with your favorite part, and press the subscribe button and bell icon for regular updates.